interaction would have happened, any cars or anything left your house, I would have known.
Like right in that area.
Oh, it'll pick up anything coming down the street this way. Oh, yeah.
This is Chris Watts, a man whose wife and 2 little daughters have been reported missing at this moment. And this is his reaction to a neighbor's surveillance footage from earlier hours of the day. What's playing on the screen is footage of Watts getting caught on camera loading his dead wife into his car. For him, luckily, the footage didn't capture enough of this for it to be massively obvious to the cops, who are also watching the footage. Chris Watts was a husband, a father, and a killer. He is responsible for the murder of his pregnant wife, Shannon Watts, the murder of his 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste, and the murder of his unborn child, Nico. Today, we're delving into a case that gripped the nation with its shocking twists and turns. The case of Chris Watts, who in a horrifying sequence of events, took the lives of his pregnant wife Shannon, 34, through strangulation, and their innocent children Bella, 4, and Celeste, 3, through smothering. The darkness of that fateful day saw Shannon buried in a shallow grave near an oil storage facility, while the kids' bodies were discarded within crude oil tanks by their father, Chris Watts. In the early hours of Monday, August 13, 2018, a normal day for the Watts family in Colorado took a surprising turn. Shannon Watts, wife of Chris Watts, had just come back from a work trip in Arizona, driven home by her friend Nicole Utoff Atkinson around 2 a.m. Little did anyone know, this day would mark the start of something tragic. As the day went on, worries started to grow. Shannon missed a doctor's appointment and wasn't answering texts from her best friend, Atkinson. When Shannon didn't show up for a work meeting, Atkinson got really concerned.
Nicole?
Yes.
Okay, what's going on?
So my friend, we were out of town for a business trip this weekend.
All right.
And I dropped her off at 2 o'clock this morning. She's 15 weeks pregnant. She wasn't feeling well, and she had a doctor's appointment this morning at 9, and I told her to let me know if she needed me to take her. She's got 2 little girls. I've called, I've texted. Her car's in the garage, her shoes she wears every single day are right in the front door.
Chris Watts, Shannon's husband, said it was okay for them to look around. But as they searched, it became clear that something was wrong. Shannon and their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste, were nowhere to be found. The house was quiet, their stuff was there, but they were gone. Shannon's purse, keys, and the girls' medicine were all left behind. Even Shannon's phone was found in the couch cushions, and the family car was still in the garage with the girls' car seats inside. It was like they had vanished. In the body camera footage captured during the police search of the Watts home, Chris Watts appeared relatively calm, but also somewhat detached from the unfolding situation. He cooperated with the officers, allowing them to search the premises, but his demeanor stood in stark contrast to the gravity of his missing family. This behavior struck many as unusual given the circumstances and contributed to raising suspicions about his involvement. After the search, the police started questioning Chris, and in this body cam footage, we can clearly see he is nervous.
She go for walks around here?
No, I go for runs. She doesn't really do anything as far as going for walks or anything.
You've talked to all the friends you guys have around the area? And what was the conversation this morning you guys had?
It was about selling the house and separation.
And how'd she take that?
We were both pretty emotional. We were both crying.
This morning she said she's going to take the kids to a friend's house. Drive where she would normally take the kids to school. People that I know that live down, Kristen lives down that way. I mean, that's the only routes I know she would really take.
She go to their house frequently, or?
And not much, but.
His excessive detailing of every aspect of his actions seemed calculated, possibly aiming to control the narrative and deflect suspicion. But it came across as unnatural and raised doubts about his authenticity. In an attempt to appear composed, he unintentionally appeared strange and out of touch with the gravity of the circumstances. This dissonance between his demeanor and the expected emotional response led to suspicions that he might be anticipating discovery and was struggling with a fight-or-flight mentality. Ultimately, his behavior was interpreted by many as a signal of guilt, further intensifying the uncertainty surrounding his wife and children's disappearance.
You guys have any kind of issues, marital issues, or?
We're going through separation.
How's that going? Civil for the most part, or?
A neighbor living near the Watts family home reported some noteworthy observations that added to the growing concerns about Chris Watts' behavior. Watch how Chris behaves in this situation, where footage of his driveway is being inspected by the cops using a neighbor's camera.
The other week when people were stealing stuff out of like garages and stuff like that.
Listen to the first thing the neighbor had to say to the cop as soon as Chris left.
No.
He then proceeded to convey his observations of the footage.
Right.
This neighbor's observation of Chris Watts' unusual behavior, combined with the context of the missing family, prompted the neighbor to become increasingly concerned. The neighbor's report added another layer to the mounting suspicions surrounding Chris Watts' actions, and played a role in drawing law enforcement's attention to his behavior. The next day, the investigation got even bigger with the help of the FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Chris Watts told the police that he didn't know where his family was, and that he hadn't seen Shannon since he left for work at 5:15 a.m. the day before. He talked to news reporters outside his house, asking for his family to come back.
I want my family back. Like, I want them safe, and I want them here. Like, this house is not the same.
Chris Watts was arrested on August 15, 2018, 2 days after his wife Shannon Watts and their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste, were reported missing. His arrest followed the discovery of suspicious circumstances and evidence that raised concerns about his involvement in their disappearance. Law enforcement had been conducting a thorough investigation into the case, and during this process, they began to find inconsistencies in Chris Watts' statements and actions. A significant inconsistency emerged when Chris Watts claimed he didn't know his family's whereabouts after leaving for work at 5:15 a.m. However, security footage from a neighbor's home contradicted this, revealing Chris backing his truck into the driveway and leaving early in the morning. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Chris Watts was not providing consistent information about his family's whereabouts and the events leading up to their disappearance. His behavior, coupled with the evidence collected by investigators, led them to suspect that he might have crucial information about the case. This suspicion, combined with the urgency of the situation and the need to ascertain the safety and well-being of Shannon, Bella, and Celeste, prompted law enforcement to arrest Chris Watts. Following his arrest, Chris Watts was brought in for questioning by law enforcement authorities. This is how the interrogation started. The interrogation begins with the investigator recapping the timeline provided by Chris, and in the process, making an attempt to establish a rapport and also make sure that Chris understands who he is dealing with. Watch as the investigator tactily switches seats with Chris to isolate him from the door and put him against the wall. This is done to make Chris feel isolated, which can result in his confidence dropping. It will make it easier to tell when Chris fabricates lies. Notice that throughout the interrogation, Chris Watts maintained a calm and seemingly emotionless demeanor, despite discussing the disappearance and death of his family. Watch him recap his day and then provide his input on the events.
2 a.m., Shannon gets into bed with me. 4 a.m., that's when my alarm goes off for work. Get dressed, brush my teeth, everything I do upstairs. Okay.
He goes into unnecessary details and gives long-winded answers, which is opposite to what someone would do if they weren't consciously trying to influence the investigator's doubts. This behavior contrasted starkly with what one anticipates from an innocent individual. It casts doubt on his sincerity, focus, and underlying intentions during the interviews.
She gets home late at night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll start from that point.
Okay. So she got home about 2 a.m.
And were you already home?
Oh yeah, I was passed out.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I felt her get into bed. That was about it. About 4 a.m. That's when on my alarm.
Chris continues to talk a lot of nothing while moving his hands. From his recap of the events, he got up, had a conversation with Shannon about their separation, went to work, and came back to an empty house when the cops arrived. He talked about his marital situation and went off in unnecessarily philosophical details for someone whose pregnant wife and 2 young daughters have been missing. He talks about discovering personal items of his wife Shannon and daughters that they wouldn't typically leave behind, reviewing his neighbor's surveillance footage and other notable encounters and occurrences. Eventually, it was not looking good for Chris with everything in context, and Detective Coder decided to turn up the psychological heat on Chris. It started off subtle with passive insinuations.
So it's okay that she's not texting you maybe, but you're going to come home and check just in case.
Mm-hmm.
But Nicole's freaking out. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I'm walking myself through this. You tell me, no, that's not what happened.
No, I mean, like, she like, for her not to get back to her friends like that, like, that's not normal, because, like, she'll get, like, tons of text messages throughout the day from direct sales.
All right.
Like, if she doesn't get back to me, I just assume that she's busy.
Okay.
This is him insinuating how Chris doesn't seem worried enough. About an hour into the interrogation is when the tone of the interrogation begins to get confrontational. Chris has had the opportunity to establish a story, and the interrogator has had the opportunity to find any holes in the story which seem suspect.
So when I work investigations like this, I have to keep an open mind on everything. Okay. And part of keeping an open mind is listening to you talk about your wife and your marriage. And the day she goes missing is the day that you guys have marital discord. Okay. So you can understand what I'm thinking about you.
Yeah, I know. It's like people that, if people knew that we were having marital issues, they're going to look at me. And it honestly just makes me sick to my stomach, because this is something that I would never do. Ever. I know, like, you have to look at every vantage point. This is something I would never do to my kids or my wife. At all.
Watch as the detective lets the silence sit. This forces Chris to go on further. The language Chris uses here is peculiar and can cause suspicion. He says he had nothing to do with any of that. There has been no discussion about what has happened. This language just makes it seem like a mistake on his part.
Why should I believe you?
Because I'm a very trustworthy person, and the people that do know me, they know how I am a calm person. I am not an argumentative person. I am a person who is never going to be abusive or physical in any kind of relationship. I would never harm my kids. I would never harm my wife. I mean, you can talk to any of my friends, any of her friends. They know me. They know I'm a low-key guy that's quiet. So I'm not about confrontation. I'm not about anything that elevates to that level. I mean, like, if someone like yells at me, screams at me, I just take it, and I just try to get it by the wayside and get it back to where it's just a cool conversation, to where, like, none of that gets to that height. Because I am not that person. I've never been that person.
Instead of giving his love for his family as reasoning as to why he would never cause them harm, Chris goes into a rambling session about who he is as a person and how nonviolent he is, how calm he is. Does this seem like an innocent man's answer? Also, notice how the detective continues to maintain his approach of staying silent. The interrogation proceeded to get more and more confrontational as it progressed, with the detective insinuating that Chris was not telling the truth. Chris, as we already know, continued to lie.
Tonight's been pretty intense, I can imagine. How are you feeling?
I've slept like 2 hours last night, so I'm like running on empty right now, but
I can see it. So why don't I do this? I'm sure you don't mind if we take a break for the night. I'm sure that you are feeling some of the pressure from me. Okay?
The detective proceeds to wrap up the interrogation for the day and make sure his rapport is maintained with Chris in order to prevent Chris from shutting down or denying things.
Get second pairs of clothes and cook eggs and give them snacks at night. You know, a lot of men, that's woman for it, right?
I don't like to get involved.
But you're not that kind of guy. Okay?
The detective builds up Chris's ego to give him a false sense of security. While doing all this, he drops in subtle statements which might cause guilt to build up further if Chris was guilty.
Chris, can you just look at me for 1 second? If there is something that happened, it's okay. It really is. Okay. If something that happened with these girls, if there was an accident, if there's something you're afraid to tell me, it's okay.
Okay.
If there's something that happened with your wife, it's okay. Okay.
Chris agreed to come in for a polygraph the next day. Detective Tammy greets Chris in the interrogation room.
Thanks. Go ahead and have a seat right here, Chris.
Sit on this?
Yep, I know. I'll explain what's that is here in a little bit.
Just like Detective Coder, You will see throughout the interrogation how good Detective Tammy is at her job. She opens the meeting with casual talk and formalities, cracking jokes, sympathizing with Chris, and many such things which establish a rapport and lowering Chris's guard.
But you don't have to worry. It's not on or anything right now. It's not gonna buzz you or anything.
I've never done this before.
For around 40 minutes, Tammy does this, along with explaining certain parts of polygraph tests. After this, she begins to get into the details of the case, asking Chris about Shannon, his family, and more. Chris tells stories, jokes around, and provides several trivial details, all while his family is missing. Tammy laughs along with him while clearly seeing what is happening. Chris was told the polygraph would take only a little time, but now the interrogation had kept going for almost 2.5 hours. Tammy made Chris recap his events in great detail and asked questions to dig further. Detective Tammy establishes that she is one of the best at this, quite clearly to Chris. How she is an expert of psychology also. She talks about how she is from the best school in the country, has had years of experience, and assures Chris that he has nothing to worry about if he did not do anything, increasing Chris's anxiety if he were guilty.
I have the best training that they offer in the United States. We use the most validated testing. That's the way I'm going to ask you the questions. So believe me, if you had nothing to do with this, I will be able to show them that today. Okay? Right. So that should give you some confidence that, this is how, you're going to be cleared today if you had nothing to do with it, okay?
The interrogation moves to the present tense, where the structure is established. The detective explains to Chris how a DL lie detection test works.
Let's go over the questions that are going to be on the test. Is that cool with you?
Yeah.
Just so you know the words to all the questions and there's no surprises and that kind of stuff, okay? And then we'll...
Am I allowed to, breathe, during this?
Yeah, I'll explain all of that to you. It's, you're obviously still a person and you still have functions that have to go on for you to be alive, so yes, you'll be able to breathe, and we just don't want you to move a bunch during the test, and I'll explain that to you, and it's for very short periods of time.
The intentional lie question, DL question, is specifically crafted to elicit an intentional lie from the person being tested. It's important that the question is clear, straightforward, and easily verifiable. For example, do you intentionally lie to gain an unfair advantage? Like this.
It's called a directed lie polygraph. So what that means is there are going to be questions on the test where I want you to lie. Because I want to see what your body looks like when you tell a lie on the test. Okay. I know it seems kind of weird, but you're going to know which questions these are and they're going to be easy to answer. So it's going to be they're all going to start with before 2018. So this first one is before 2018. Did you ever lose your temper with someone you cared about? We've all lost our temper with someone we've cared about in our life. So I want you to think about, you don't have to tell me what it is, but I want you to actually have that moment in your mind when you actually lost your temper with someone you cared about.
Okay.
Whether it was with Shanann, whether it was with your parents, whether it was with your children, it could be with anyone, but it was...
Do you want me to say no to that one?
Yes, so you're going to actually lie to that question, since we all have lost our temper with someone we've cared about before. So I'm going to say before 2018, did you ever lose your temper with someone you cared about? And you're going to say...
No.
Because you're telling a...
lie.
Awesome.
Notice how it almost seems like Chris is not in a state to even attempt to beat the polygraph. Chris has been in this massively uncomfortable situation, and the thought of trying to find a way out of this must have been too tiring. This is how the test went.
Test is about to begin. Please remain still. Regarding what number you wrote on the piece of paper, did you write the number 1?
No.
Did you write the number 2?
No.
Did you write the number 5?
No.
This portion of the test is complete. Please remain still while I take the instrument out of operation. Okay, you can relax.
Watch Detective Tammy boost Chris's confidence, and then immediately say things that would be extremely intimidating for Chris in this situation if he were guilty.
And the coolest thing about this is right now, there's only one person in this room that knows what the truth is. And in about 5 minutes, there's going to be 2 of us. So that's the coolest part, okay? And then I can go share that with them out there.
Actual questions start 10 minutes after the introduction of the concept. It went like this.
Regarding Shanann's disappearance, do you intend to answer all of the questions truthfully?
Yes.
Is your first name Christopher?
Yes.
Just breathe normal. Before 2018, did you ever lose your temper with someone you cared about?
No.
Did you physically cause Shanann's disappearance?
No.
Were you born in 1985?
Yes.
Before 2018, did you ever say anything out of anger to a loved one?
No.
Are you lying about the last time you saw Shanann?
No.
Are you now in the state of Colorado?
Yes.
Before 2018, have you ever wanted to hurt someone to get even with them?
No.
Do you know where Shanann is now?
No.
This portion of the test is complete. Please remain still while I take the instrument out of operation.
Detective Coder joins the room as the test finishes.
So, it is completely clear that you were not honest during the testing, and I think you already know that. You did not pass the polygraph test.
Okay.
Okay.
The detective insinuates that it is futile to even attempt to keep his lies up. She makes sure Chris knows that they have enough to conclude that they have very strong evidence against him. Both the detectives make this known to Chris.
I told you that we've done some work overnight.
Yes.
I told you that we've got a lot of leads. Okay, that wasn't a lie.
I know.
We know a lot more than you think we do. Okay, and here's where we're confused. You're this great guy, and I'm not just telling you that. Okay, I'm telling you that because everyone tells us that. Okay, we can't find anyone to say anything bad about you. Chris is a great guy. He's a good father. He's a good man. We're confused as to why you're not taking care of your beautiful children.
I'm not taking care of them right now.
Right now. Where are they?
I don't know where they're at. Honestly, I do not know where they are at. If I could have my babies back home right now, I would. I want them back. I want everybody back. That is the God's honest truth.
They still try to appeal to his ego and sympathize with him so that he does not shut down. They are very close to a breakthrough. All this while maintaining pauses at the right time, forcing Chris to talk, still stroking his ego by complimenting him on the smallest things. And soon, the first breakthrough occurred.
I'm not proud of it. I don't think anything like that could happen. I don't think I'd ever do it, but I did.
I know. Keep going.
And she accused me of it. I denied it. I cheated on her, and I feel horrible for it. Like, she was pregnant, and it was, I don't want to, I didn't hurt her. I cheated on her. I hurt her emotionally. I cheated on her. And I feel absolutely horrible about this, but that's what I've been holding. When I didn't go to the Rocky game, I was with her.
Okay.
I went to dinner with her.
Okay. Okay. Get back to your wife and your daughters.
Okay.
Where are they?
That I do not know. That was what I was holding back. Like, I didn't know, like, what I did. I know.
Chris, in the interview today, you weren't asked about infidelity. You were asked about...
I was holding back from last night.
That's when why you failed today.
That's not how that works. You would have reactions to every single question.
This seems like a tactic to fool both the cops and himself. It's almost as if he believes that if he confesses to something, even a small sin, it is fine for him to lie about the rest. The ego-stroking and calm confrontation continues to help progress the questioning. Chris himself is unraveling under pressure, so all the cops need to do is keep the pressure on him simply by presenting the evidence.
Based on the people that I've talked to, and Tammy's talked to, based on all the investigations we've done, based on your cell phone, both your cell phones, your wife's cell phone, Nikki's cell phone, okay? Based on talking with family members and friends, and based on talking with everyone. Here's what we know, okay? And I'm not gonna lie to you right now, here's what we know, okay? Chris is a good man. Everyone said it, okay? I'm not just telling you that because I, want to blow smoke here. You're a good man, okay? Nobody can fake answers about packing a backpack, nobody. You either pack a backpack for your kids or you don't, okay? This should have been the happiest time of your marriage. Okay? You and Shanann. This should have been the happiest time. She's making a little money. She's making good money. You're making great money. You both have a job. You have beautiful kids. You have a beautiful house. You're in Colorado. Clean air, good people. Okay? And on top of that, you look pretty good now. You're pretty fit, okay? This should have been the time of your marriage where you guys were happy and thriving and productive, okay? And I believe that Shanann's the reason none of that happened. I believe that she's a controlling person. Maybe doesn't listen to you as much as she should. I think that she can do whatever she wants and you can't. Okay? I think if you were to go to a restaurant, she would order whatever the hell she wants. And as soon as you order a nice steak, she says, whoa, buddy. Okay? A woman that lets her man do all of the backpack packing and all of the cooking because you're a good person. And I think that she started on the path to leave the marriage.
Tammy asks if it was an accident. Chris keeps unraveling. Eventually, he asks for the possibility of speaking with his father in private. This is how it went.
What's going on with the thing, or? It's polygraph. Failed it. Yeah, because there's too much emotions. It's not going to let me go. Is there any reason why they shouldn't? They know I had an affair.
Chris chooses to turn the whole thing on Shannon. As we hear in his partial confession,
They were blue. Freaked out people seeing me.
So she killed Lucy Stephen, choked on death.
That's rage. I hadn't.
he killed Shannon in a fit of rage after he had found out that she had smothered their children. We now know this is not even remotely true, but the authorities now had enough to make an arrest. Watch how they dealt with this story. They entered quite in time as soon as talks of a lawyer began. Watch as Chris feigns crying and blames his wife for this. It seems as if he is tapped into the thought that he's going to jail, but is using that as fuel to make it seem like he's upset about this specific situation. Chris eventually told the police about where to find the bodies.
What is that?
It's the BRC Survey 319.
Okay. Whereabouts is Shanann and the girls? Okay, can you mark it for me? The S for Shanann. Okay, and where are the girls at?
Mm-hmm.
The bodies of Shannon Watts, Bella Watts, and Celeste Watts were found on the property of the oil and natural gas company where Chris Watts worked. Shannon's body was discovered in a shallow grave, while the bodies of Bella and Celeste were found submerged in oil tanks located on the same property. The discovery of their bodies came after Chris Watts' confession and arrest. This grim revelation marked a critical turning point in the case, confirming the tragic fate of Shannon and her 2 young daughters. The police, understandably not satisfied with Chris's confession, proceed to probe further. They question him about why he didn't call the ambulance immediately. Tammy presents the fact that even if her kid would be blue, the last thing a parent would admit immediately is that they are dead. They would do anything to revive them. Chris instead chose to strangle Shannon in this situation. Will this sit right with any parent who knows what it is to love their child? Chris Watts was arrested on the 16th of August, 2018, in the case of the murder of Shannon Watts. Chris stayed adamant on the fact that it was Shannon who killed the kids. This led to media trials of Shannon and even people defending Chris. But 3 months after the incident, Chris Watts pled guilty on all 9 counts of first-degree murder of his wife, his 2 daughters, and his unborn son. This led to him not getting the death penalty.
Court is going to sentence you, sir, to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections with no possibility of parole.
In a police interview in February 2019, Chris Watts gave an in-detail confession of how he had killed his wife and killed his daughters on the way to burying his wife.
I told her I didn't love her anymore. That's what happened. I got on top of her. And every time I think about it, I'm just like, did I know I was going to do that before I got on top of her?
Did you say she said something like that you were hurting the baby or something?
That was before that, because when I was straddling her, it was kind of like around her waist type deal. There was already something in my mind that was implanted that I was going to do it, and I woke up that morning, it was going to happen, and I had no control of it.
So what happened next?
And she had her little pink blanket with her. She was like, what's wrong? Tell me, mommy.
And where was she at that point?
Yeah, just pretty much on the bed, but she was face down.
So what happened when you got out there?
I took Shanann out just to a place off to the site.
Mm-hmm. What were the girls doing when you were doing that?
Just sent them back to the truck.
And then what happened after that?
CC was first.
So was she alive when she went into the oil tank? No?
I put the blanket over her head. Strangled her right there in the back seat.
What was Bella do?
And then the same for Bella, just without a blanket.
With the blanket. Like every time I closed my eyes, I just hear her saying, "Daddy, no," and that was it. I hear that every day.
On November 19th, 2018, Chris Watts was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for each of the first-degree murder charges, and an additional 48 years for the unlawful termination of pregnancy and other related charges. This sentencing effectively ensured that Chris Watts would spend the rest of his life in prison for his heinous crimes. The guilty pleas and subsequent sentencing marked the final verdict of the court in the Chris Watts case. The Chris Watts case serves as a somber reminder that even within the seemingly safest corners of society, the truth can be far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The Chris Watts interrogation is often studied in order to study human behavior in such situations, and it is a prime example of a guilty man trying to pry his way out. Another fascinating study in interrogation reactions is that of Stephen McDaniel. Watch our video on Stephen McDaniel, the killer who got caught on TV, to see an approach that is diametrically opposite to what Chris went with. I promise you, it is a fascinating and one-of-a-kind watch.